Miracles of Padre Pios. It is difficult to define what a miracle is. Miracles can be considered as a supernatural manifestation, or again, as a phenomenon by which the laws of nature undergo the action of a superior force, that is to say, of the will of God. It remains that many miracles have occurred during the life of Padre Pios de Pietrelcina. Conscious that miracles were divine, whenever a person came to find him to thank him for a special favor, such as a miracle, he recommended that he thank the Lord, the only one who could perform miracles. Padre Pios obtained one of his first miracles in 1908. While at the convent of Montefusco, he had the idea of picking chestnuts for his Aunt Daria, in Pietrelcina, which he loved very much. He placed the chestnuts in a small bag. His Aunt Daria received the chestnuts and ate them, keeping the little bag as a souvenir. A long time later, Aunt Daria drew an oil lamp to a drawer to look for something, forgetting that her husband kept gun cartridges in this drawer. A spark escaping from the lamp fired the drawer and the explosion hit Aunt Daria in the face. Screaming in pain, Aunt Daria took from the chest of drawers the little bag in which Abbe Pios had sent her chestnuts and she put it on her face. Immediately, the pain ceased and her face showed no later. During the Second World War, bread being rationed, a growing number of people came to the convent of Notre Dame de Graces to ask for charity. One day when the monks went to the refectory, there was only half a kilo of bread in the basket. The community recited its blessing and sat down in the refectory to eat the soup. Padre Pios, who had stopped at the church, returned with a large quantity of baguettes of fresh bread. His superior asked him where he found all this bread. Padre Pios answered, "A pilgrim at the gate gave it to me." Nobody said anything, all had understood that only Padre Pios could meet this kind of pilgrim. One morning the sacristan had forgotten to have the sacred species consecrated for communion. There were only a few left in the ciborium. After completing the confessions, Padre Pios began to give communion to the many faithful. Not only did he never miss holy species, but after he had finished, there were still some left. One day, one of Padre Pio's spiritual daughters sat down by the side of the street to read a letter from him. The wind blew and the letter escaped from the hands of the girl. Fortunately, the letter stopped against a stone and the young woman was able to recover it. The next day, Padre Pios told him, "Next time, beware of the wind. If I had not stepped on my letter to stop her, she would have ended up in the valley." One of Padre Pio's spiritual daughters, Mrs. Cleonis, said, "During the last war, my grandson was taken prisoner. Without news of him for a year, we all thought he was dead. His parents were in great pain. One day his mother knelt at Padre Pio's feet in the confessional and asked him, 'Tell me if my son is alive. I will not go away until you tell me.' Moved, Padre Pios raised to her with tears in her face, she said, 'Get up and go in peace.' A few days later, I could not bear the tears of the parents, so I decided to ask Padre Pios for a miracle. My heart filled with hope, I said, 'Padre, I want to write to my grandson Giovannino, I can only write his name because I do not know his address. You and your guardian angel can tell us where he is.' Padre Pios did not answer. I wrote the letter and in the evening, before going to bed, laid it on my bedside table. The next morning, to my surprise, the letter was gone. Moved, I hastened to go and thank Padre Pios, who said to me, 'Thanks the Virgin.' After a fortnight, the whole family cried with joy, thanking God and Padre Pios, because my grandson, whom we thought was dead. Mrs. Louisa had a son who was an officer of the British Royal Navy. Louisa prayed every day for the conversion and for the salvation of her son. One day she met an unknown Englishman in San Giovanni Rotondo. He had some newspapers with him. Louisa asked to see the newspapers. Now, they said that the ship on board of which his son was wrecked. Dismayed, she ran to Padre Pios, who asked him, "Who told you that your son was dead?" Then, Padre Pio gives him the name and address of the hotel where he was staying, waiting to be boarded. young officer, who had escaped the sinking of the ship in question in the Atlantic Ocean. Luisa immediately wrote a letter to her son and received an answer from him a few days later. In San Giovanni Rotondo there was a very good woman. So good that Padre Pio said that it could be an example to some confessors. In other words, she was a holy woman. Towards the end of Lent, this woman, named Bellina, fell seriously ill. The doctors had no hope of saving her. Her husband, accompanied by their 5 sons, went to the convent. They begged Padre Pio's. The 2 youngest children were crying and crying at Padre Pio's coat. Upset, Padre Pio's tried to comfort them and promised to pray for their mother. At the beginning of Holy Week, Padre Pio's expressed himself differently. Indeed, to those who implored his intercession for the healing of Bellina, the Padre replied with assurance, "She will be resurrected on Easter Day." Good Friday, Bellina lost consciousness and, early on Saturday, fell into a coma. After a few hours she did not move. She seemed dead. Some relatives of Bellina, following the tradition, put her on her nuptial dress. Others, desperate, ran to the convent, where Padre Pio's repeated to them, "She will be resurrected." Padre Pio's went there to celebrate Holy Mass. As Padre Pio's began to sing the Gloria and as the bells flew, announcing the resurrection of Christ, Padre Pio's voice broke with a hiccup and his eyes filled with tears. At the same moment, Bellina resuscitated. Without help, she straightened up on her bed, then knelt down and recited the creed 3 times aloud. Then she got up and smiled. Was she cured? Was she resuscitated? Padre Pio's had said, "She will rise again." He did not say, "She will heal." When Bellina was asked what had happened to her while everyone thought she was dead, she just replied, blushing a little, I was going up, happy. As I was entering a great light, I am back, I came back." One mother said, "My eldest daughter, born in 1953, was saved in 1955 by Padre Pio's." Indeed, on the morning of January 6, 1955, while my husband and I were at Mass, the girl, staying at home with her grandparents and one of her uncles, fell into a vat of boiling water. She has third-degree burns to the abdomen and the back of the body. I begged Padre Pio's to help us save the girl. The doctor, who arrived an hour and a half after we called him, did not administer any medicine, and advised us to take my daughter to the hospital because he feared the worst. After the doctor's departure, I began to call on Padre Pio's. Around noon, as I was getting ready to go to the hospital, my little girl called me from her room and said, "Mom, burns, they left." I asked him who had taken them away. She replied, "It's Padre Pio's who came. He put the wounds in his hand on my burns." In fact, the girl's body showed no signs of burning anymore. The peasants of San Giovanni Rotondo are pleased to report this event. It was spring and the almond blossoms announced a bumper harvest. Now, the trees were covered with caterpillars. A multitude of caterpillars, advancing in bands, attacked the flowers and the leaves, then the bark. At the end of 2 days, after having vainly tried to stop this scourge, the owners, many of whom lived on this culture, spoke to Padre Pio's about it. From the window of the convent, the monk observed the almond trees infested with caterpillars and decided to bless them. After putting on his priestly vestments, he began to pray. When he had finished, he traced, with holy water, in the direction of the trees, a great sign of the cross. The next day, the caterpillars were gone, but the branches of the almond trees were stripped like sticks. Despite this, the harvest, which seemed compromised, was more abundant than ever. How could trees without flowers, with bare branches, bear fruit in such abundance? No one knows. The best horticulturists could not explain this phenomenon. Thanks for watching, share, comment, and subscribe. Saint Padre Pio's pray for us.